It was a peaceful night in a city. In one house, a light was still on. The room inside was messy, and in the middle of it stood a man looking at his bank book. He finally saved enough money. Bending toward the light, Akina Shoji, a company worker, felt ready to quit his job and start his own business. He was happy to leave the office behind and proud that he had not upset his boss, even after working many long hours. Shuji had delayed his salary for months to save money for his store. A magazine had inspired him to follow this dream. His new life, free from company rules, was about to begin. But then, his head felt pain. Once again, he had stayed up all night. This tired feeling was normal for him. It often came right before he passed out. Even as he lost consciousness, Shuji felt happy. He planned to get back to work after he rested. Sometime later, he woke up in a weird place. He found himself on the floor lying in the middle of a glowing magic circle. 4 people stood above him, soldiers in armor and people who looked like magicians. At first, Shuji thought he was dreaming, but then a man sitting on a throne, King Rao, told him that this wasn't a dream. He had been summoned to another world. Shuji introduced himself and the king explained their problem. Their land was under constant attack by demons and things were getting worse. They had summoned a hero to help. The king asked to use Shuji's power, but Shuji, thinking this was just a boring dream, said he had no power. Then the king told him that heroes would always receive special powers from God. He told him to shout, "Skill open, see them." Shuji nervously repeated the words. Suddenly, a screen appeared in front of him. It showed his name, age, and his special skill. His ability was called Cultivation. Based on the explanation, he realized he could grow anything in the ground and make it grow very fast. He told everyone about his skill. The king and his people didn't seem excited. They were disappointed and said the skill was not useful. Someone suggested using him as a decoy or even replacing him with another hero. The king told everyone to calm down and said they would use Shuji's skill for farming instead. He gave Shuji a field at the edge of the capital and use his skills to create food for the country. Shuji just wanted was to wake up from this dream and start his own business. However, Shuji soon found himself in a field feeling bored. With the king's permission, he had been living there for a week. During that time, he couldn't wake up from this dream. He tried using his skill to grow vegetables, still hoping it would be useful. He found that he could grow plants in just a few days, but that was all his skill could do. It wasn't enough to keep him interested, and he soon got bored. On the 8th day, Shuji began to realize that he was not in dream but reality. He decided to visit the king. Later, he stood before the ruler and explained how things were going. After thanking Rao, Shuji showed the vegetables he had grown. The king and those around him were surprised since Shuji can grow vegetables fast. Impressed, the king said he wanted to buy the entire harvest to help solve hunger in the country. Seeing that the king was in a good mood, Shuji asked how long he would stay in this world. He guessed it would be until another hero was summoned. The king didn't understand at first, so Shuji explained that he had hoped to return home when a new hero arrived. But the answer shocked him. It was impossible to go back. It was a shocking statement from the king. Later that day, Shuji got drunk and lost his temper. He cursed at the king, angry that he had been brought to this world without his consent. In the end, he became a simple farmer. Even though he worked hard, saved money, and never inherited his parents' house, life was tough. Once he calmed down, he started thinking about his past. His parents had been farmers who spent all their time working in the fields. Shuji found ways to entertain himself, but everything changed one day. His father, worried about their future, attended a neighborhood seminar that turned out to be a scam. His parents took on debt and worked extra hours to pay it off. Not long after, his father died. The life insurance helped cover the debt, but when Shuji reached adulthood, his mother also passed away as if she felt relieved. Seeing how his parents ended up, Shuji gave up on farming and became an office worker, trying to live a better life. He worked hard for years, saved money, and dreamed of starting his own business. He desperately saved money. But in this new world, he realized he couldn't even open a bank account. Feeling defeated, Shuji finished his last bottle of alcohol. A drunken thought came into his mind. He hoped he could get more booze with his skill. Thinking it was a great plan, he went to the field and buried the empty bottle, hoping a beer tree would grow. A second later, he passed out in the field. When morning came, Shuji woke up with a hangover. He remembered that he had spent all his money on liquor. As he looked up, he noticed a tree with bottles hanging from its branches. He was surprised by how many bottles were there because he remembered leaving only one in the field. Then he recalled that he had used his cultivation skill on it. He was still unsure on what was happening. He wondered if alcohol in this world grew from trees. Still, that should be impossible, and he doubted they were liquor in the first place. He picked one and discovered that the cork was a stem. After opening a bottle, he poured some into a glass and tasted it. The drink turned out to be the same liquor he had. Since he had a lot of liquor to himself, Shuji went to a liquor store in the kingdom's shopping district. He offered to sell the liquor. The merchant was surprised seeing a lot of them. Shuji explained that they were thank you gifts, but he couldn't drink everything. After thinking it over, the merchant tried a sip, planning to buy it if he liked it. After tasting it, he got surprised by how they tasted nice and offered 8 silver coins for all the bottles. This was a good deal since items made through the cultivation skill were high quality. After the sale, Shuji asked about how these kind of alcohol were made. The seller told him that he could ask that question in the brewery for their method. That answer made Shuji think that alcohol making was normal in this world. Shuji also asked about skills and learned that others had them too. He wondered breweries also uses skills to brew, like how farmers could have farming-related skills. But the merchant said he have not heard such rumors, but people with fighting skills earned more as adventurers. Shuji realized that others would see his farming skills as weak and useless, but he decided that was actually an advantage. After leaving the bar, Shuji planned to grow items that sold well. Soon he stood in front of a garden full of items: shields, swords, potions, and more. All of them had grown from the ground. He experimented by planting everything he could find to understand his skill better. For safety and privacy, he also built a fence around the area. Looking at what he had grown, Shuji realized his skill was powerful. He could grow almost anything. If something didn't have seeds, he just buried it like a potato. Even normal fruits grew overnight, which made him question if other jobs were even needed. His best plant was one that grew coins. He could grow his own money. Shuji knew the king and his court would eventually find out about his skill. Because of that, he thought about making the fence stronger and finding someone else to support him. Shuji believed that if the king understood how useful his skill was, he might be forced to work like a slave. He didn't want to live the same life his exploited parents did, so he decided to use the skill for his own benefit. He thought about going into hiding after cultivating more gold. However, that would be him being exploitative instead. He realized he could just start his own business, something he had always wanted. With his power, he believed it was possible, so he chose to become a peddler or wandering merchant. He used his skill to prepare, paid the fee to join the merchant guild, bought a new cart, and sold part of his harvest to get the money he needed to start. After some time, all the preparations were finished. Shuji remembered how, in the past, he had worked too hard and pushed himself beyond his limits. He had managed to save some money, but then he suddenly ended up in another world with no way back. When he was ready to begin his new journey, he felt sure that he would start his own business. This time, no one would take advantage of him. He planned to live the way he wanted and do his best. Before leaving, he decided to hire someone to travel with him, since there was a chance of running into bandits on the road. At the same time, he wanted to hire a woman who could fight well, thinking it would look impressive if she defeated enemies with skill and style. That was what he hoped for. But when Shuji met the person he hired, he saw a girl lying on the ground, crying. She had broken her weapon again, even though the job she was doing wasn't that difficult. Shuji noticed something odd about her and started to wonder if it was just part of how things worked in this new world. In front of Shuji, the girl sat on the ground crying over a broken weapon. Seeing her like that reminded him of how they first met. Back then, he had just finished getting ready and was waiting for his escort. Soon, a group of adventurers from the guild arrived. They looked dependable, something Shuji noticed right away when he introduced himself. The group included a warrior named Kyle, an archer named Kava, and a girl with long, shiny hair. Shuji couldn't help but notice her. She looked calm, especially with those oversized gloves, but in her hand was a large steel rod. Shuji asked for her name. She nervously introduced herself as Maine, and her long rod was for hitting enemies. Shuji commented that it was actually a smart way to fight. It showed that appearances could be misleading. Her teammates, however, warned her not to break her weapon again or slow them down. This made Shuji a bit unsure about her. He found it hard to believe that such a solid weapon could break. He guessed she had already broken her first one. After introductions, the group started their journey. As time passed, Shuji grew bored and tried to start a conversation. He asked if they were always a team together, but one of them claimed there was no way their team with the weapon killer. When the girl reacted a bit strongly, it made Shuji curious about how she got the nickname Weapon Killer. Just as the warrior began to explain, someone nearby shouted. Suddenly, a group of bandits appeared, surrounding them and demanding money, and the girl. These bandits were from a gang called the Bloody Idiots. Even though the situation looked bad, the adventurers were ready to fight back. The archer quickly told Shuji to hide inside the carriage and gave instructions to the others. Shuji locked himself inside. Through a small window, he watched the battle happen. The carriage was built like a small shelter, keeping him safe. But even while hiding, he wanted to see how strong his escorts really were. The archer started shooting at the enemies and rained down arrows on them. Even someone new like Shuji could see how strong he was. Not far away, the team's spearman was also fighting, cutting down enemies one after another, showing his strength. Shuji noticed that only 2 people were actually fighting. He then looked at the girl who had been told to join the battle by the spearman. She ran toward the enemies holding a staff. Shuji was confused and didn't know how she planned to fight. Her movements made him doubt that she was a real adventurer. Then, with her eyes shut in fear, the girl hit one of the bandits in the stomach. While the bandit was laughing at her for the light tap, a powerful force came out from her metal rod, sending him flying. The other bandits and even Shuji in the cart were shocked. After seeing one of their own crash to the ground after being thrown so high, the remaining bandits ran away in fear. Shuji realized the girl was strong, but then he saw her fall to the ground, crying in front of a broken metal rod. He couldn't understand how such thick metal broke so easily and wondered how much power it took to do that. That was how the spearman's story continued. The girl had great strength, which caused her weapons to break often. Because of this, people started calling her the weapon killer. Later on, the girl happily ran with a new mithril sword, a reward for defeating the bandits. Her teammates told her to sell it before she would break it, since it was worth around 200 gold coins. When Shuji heard this, he thought he could make money by selling swords if he cultivate them with his skill. But the girl refused to sell the sword. She said she wouldn't break or sell it. Then the archer told everyone to move faster so they could reach the city soon. Even with everything that had happened, they were almost there. Later, the merchants group arrived at the city, driving through narrow streets. Shuji saw a merchant town in another world for the first time. People were busy with their work, and he looked forward to starting their first business there. Outside a tavern, Shuji told his mercenaries to rest since he planned to start trading the next day. He believed the city was safe enough. The mercenaries were unsure about their payment getting cut off, but Shuji promised to pay them the full amount. That promise quickly earned him their respect, as they never heard this kind of treatment before. After that, everyone went their separate ways. Kava rested in the tavern and Kyle went to chase some women. Shuji assumed it was just an overnight with a slave. However, the girl, Maine, decided to stay behind. She quietly called out to him with a small request after everyone said their goodbyes. A little later, she became out of breath, carrying 5 large boxes with ease. She helped Shuji carry the heavy load. Shuji thanked her and Maine told him it was no problem. Shuji had spoken with the merchant guild and made plans to open a shop in the town's free market overnight. He couldn't leave the girl at the inn because she wanted to help sell and carry goods for an extra income, using her superhuman strength. Soon after, they sat under their tent and laid out all the items. As they worked, Maine spotted a beautiful piece of fabric. She pointed it out to Shuji, who became curious about how it was made. It turned out to be part of a handkerchief that Shuji had brought from his old world. He gave one to Maine and she smiled brightly as she thanked him. To him, it was just a cheap item he had bought long ago. After setting everything up on the counter, Shuji was ready to sell. He had prepared too many items and got a bit carried away with his cultivation skill. Maine was amazed by the number and variety of goods. Then Shuji noticed that most of the market visitors were middle-class customers. He arranged the goods carefully, placing food items in front and expensive ones in the back. That way, if someone tried to steal, they would likely take the cheaper items instead of the valuable ones. It didn't take long for people to gather nearby. Shuji and Maine loudly announced the opening of their first business, a traveling store, and called out to people passing by. Most of the crowd were men who came after hearing Maine's voice. This made Shuji happy because it meant there was a better chance of selling the large number of items they brought. Shuji kept telling everyone about the opening of his mobile shop. He swore to sell these products he had grown with his cultivation skill. These included food, alcohol, and clothes, which surprised the buyers. Still, Shuji felt that he had brought too much stock. During the sales, customers tried asking for the price of a bundled radish. He offered the price of 2 copper coins. This shocked everyone, confusing Shuji. He had been comparing coin values between his world and this one, where vegetables usually cost about 200 yen, but he had forgotten that there was a food shortage in this kingdom. He raised the price by 8 copper coins, which was still considered cheap in the market. Shuji was surprised that it was still considered as cheap despite being overpriced. The next popular item was dried meat, sold at 30 copper coins. The customers were amazed. They said it was cheaper than what another store offered, making it a good deal. After hearing the prices, they bought all the meat and vegetables in large amounts. Soon these items were completely sold out, but people kept buying whatever else was left. After some time, Shuji sighed in surprise at how fast the goods had sold. Then a group of housewives arrived looking for the cheap meat. Shuji quickly explained that only clothes were left. Though the clothes were second-hand, they were still in good condition and priced at 3 gold coins. The residents were shocked again. Back in Shuji's world, you could buy decent clothes for around 2,000 yen, so he felt that 3,000 yen or 3 gold coins was a fair price in this world. A moment later, the women left in a hurry, saying they needed a minute. They came back with bags of money and bought all the clothes without leaving anything behind. Shuji already confirmed that the sewing technology in this world was underdeveloped during the time when he bought these clothes from the capital's thrift shop. He bought a bulk one time and increased their numbers by tenfold afterward with his cultivation skill. While most of the food was sold quickly, there were still many boxes of clothes left. However, the women soon bought those as well. Shuji was about to open another box, but when he turned around, he saw that all the boxes were empty. Realizing everything was sold out, he announced that the goods for the day were gone. The other merchants were surprised since it was still morning. He promised to bring more items next time and was surprised by how eager the housewives were to get good deals. The next morning, Maine felt happy about Shuji's success, and the warrior was impressed by how well he handled trade. They were already near the capital and so far had not run into any bandits on the way back. But when they mentioned this, they remembered that the journey wasn't over yet. Suddenly, another group of bandits appeared, just like before. The archer and spearman got ready for battle. Maine pulled out her mithril sword, wanting to fight by herself and show how strong her weapon was. She seemed different from how she was during the last battle. Still, the spearman warned her not to break the sword. As the bandits attacked, Shuji hid in the carriage and Maine struck the enemy with a strong hit. The sword held up for at least one attack, which was expected from a mithril blade. Saying she wasn't done yet, she rushed at the others and even cut one of their steel clubs in half. Maine beat the enemies one by one with great effort. Shuji noticed that her movements had changed, but there was one problem. She was pushing herself too hard. After a few more strikes, the mithril sword broke. It couldn't handle Maine's strength. She wouldn't have noticed unless Shuji pointed it out. After the battle, Maine was totally depressed. The spearman said that luck wasn't on her side and no one expected the mithril sword to break. It showed just how outrageous Maine's strength really was. That sword had once belonged to a bandit, but now it was just a broken weapon. Still hopeful, Maine looked through the items they had taken from the bandits to find another mithril weapon. But the others noticed she had already destroyed any that were there. After the fight, the men teased Maine for being a weapon killer, and she didn't know what to do. Shuji noticed how the men looked down on Maine and could understand why. A little later in the royal capital, Shuji paid the adventurers for their service and said goodbye to them on good terms. As he continued with his errands, he thought about the girl. He believed she should have found a middle ground. Maine's power was strong, and Shuji wondered if he could use his own cultivation skill to help her control it. But when he came back to reality, he reminded himself that he needed to focus on his own safety first. He didn't know when the kingdom might decide to kill him for being useless, or force him to serve them if they discovered the true strength of his skill. So, Shuji made up his mind to leave the kingdom as soon as possible. To prepare, he gathered some information. The area near the capital was safe enough for people to go out and shop, but there were bandits outside the city. He knew he would need a bodyguard. He thought about the warrior and archer he had worked with before, but he figured they were already busy. So, Shuji decided he would visit the Adventurers Guild the next time he went out to trade. The next day at the guild, Shuji stood at the entrance and saw something shocking. Maine was being threatened and could be turned into a slave. When Shuji stepped into the guild entrance, he was surprised by what he saw. Maine had called out to him, saying she couldn't pay the interest on her debt. Because of that, she was about to be taken away. Shuji sighed, annoyed by the new problem. He asked how much she owed. The repayment was 1 gold coin per month, with 4 extra silver coins as interest. Shuji could afford to pay it, but he knew that doing so wouldn't fix the real issue. So instead, he spent 2 gold coins to buy the mithril sword she broke the other day. This gave Maine enough money left over to buy a new weapon. She was truly thankful for the help. The moneylender took the payment and left, shouting that if Maine didn't pay next time, she would become a slave. Shuji asked what had happened and suggested they talk more in the cafeteria across the street. Later, while sitting at a table, Maine explained that she had a skill called superhuman. It boosted her physical strength, but she couldn't control it well, so she often broke her weapons. Shuji realized her ability seemed more impressive than his own cultivation skill. But sadly, her power didn't stop her from feeling pain. Because of that, she avoided using her bare hands. Some monsters were too strong for cheap weapons, so she kept buying expensive ones on credit. Every time she broke a weapon, her debt grew. Shuji guessed that was the reason why people started calling her Weapon Killer. Maine also said she tried joining the army, but she kept destroying the equipment and putting her teammates in danger and was let go each time. Now, because she couldn't repay her debts, she risked being forced into slavery. Thinking about her situation, Shuji believed becoming a slave over something like this was terrible. But in a way, he was also a slave, working for a company where his boss didn't know his true abilities. Just like him, Maine was a talented person who had been misunderstood and unable to use her full potential. A little later, Shuji dragged a sack along the craftsman's street in the royal capital. He stopped in front of a building with a sign showing swords, hoping it was the right place. As he got closer, steam came from the door and hit him with heat. When he stepped inside, he caught the attention of the blacksmith, who was still working. The blacksmith told his current customer to wait. Shuji was surprised to see someone from the gnome race for the first time. He told the blacksmith that there were no gnomes in his hometown, and this was the first time he had heard of such a country. The blacksmith got straight to the point and asked what Shuji needed. Shuji set the large sack down and poured its contents onto the table. They were dozens of broken mithril swords. The blacksmith was shocked. It was actually the same broken sword Shuji had bought from Maine, but his skill had caused them to multiply. Shuji asked the blacksmith to repair one sword and use the rest to create a new weapon. Since he couldn't handle the mithril himself, he had to rely on someone skilled. He also wondered if the dwarf could make something even better than the original sword. The blacksmith agreed but said it would cost 20 gold coins. Without hesitation, Shuji handed over a bag of gold coins in advance. Seeing this trust, the blacksmith introduced himself. His name was Maud, and he promised to do his best. Outside, Shuji was glad that the blacksmith respected him. It meant a lot after all he had done. He had always believed that there was no true reward or respect in the world, only work and duty. Even so, he planned to protect his pride as a merchant, no matter how hard it became. 10 days later, he returned to the guild and met Maine there. He claimed he had a quest for her and asked her to move to his office. The building looked more like a private house, which made Maine think strange thoughts. But he calmed her down and asked about her work as an adventurer, and if she already bought a new weapon. Maine flinched and showed how the weapon she bought with his money got broken already. Then he asked if she wanted to become his escort guard full-time. He wasn't sure about his safety in the future since he planned to open a business, so he needed someone to protect him all the time. When Maine said she might break another weapon, he told her it wasn't a problem and pointed to something under a cloth. When Shuji pulled the cloth back, it revealed several dozen swords. Maine was surprised not only by how many swords there were, but also by how each one of them were made out of mithril. Maine couldn't understand why such expensive weapons were kept in a shabby cabin. Shuji told her she could use any weapons she wanted, and destroy them freely if she agreed to work for him. He also said he would take on her debt so she can work freely. Maine was shocked and thought the offer was too much. So Shuji added some conditions. She had to stay with him all the time while he worked and go with him no matter what kind of danger was involved. However, she must not enter any places he told her not to go in. Even with the conditions, Maine still couldn't believe the offer. Then Shuji talked about the pay. He said it would be 40 gold coins per month and he would be deducting the debt little by little from the salary. Now he wanted to hear how much her current debt. When she heard this, she told him that she had a debt of 1,000 gold coins. The debt kept growing because of the high interest. Even though the total amount was more than 10 million yen in Japanese currency, Shuji said he could pay it off with her next payment. Maine was surprised by how much money Shuji had. He then asked what she thought about the job he offered, but Maine still had doubts. Shuji let her break weapons that he paid for, and it seemed like hiring her cost him more than what he would gain. The real reason Shuji hired her was because he believed in her amazing superhuman skill. He understood that Maine just didn't know how to use it properly yet. He held her hands and told her he wanted to give her a chance to grow. He promised to give her as many weapons as she needed and even said that one day, he would get her a weapon that would never break, no matter what. He wanted her to choose to work for someone who saw her true worth, even if he seemed like a fraud at the moment. Shuji cleared away her doubts by saying that her strength mattered and that she didn't have to carry her nickname anymore. He promised that one day it would just be a funny memory. Maine, feeling encouraged by Shuji's faith in her, said she wanted to become his subordinate and stop resenting her own power. When they made the deal, she promised to stay by his side and fight with all her strength to protect him. As she wiped her tears on his clothes, Shuji smiled. He felt proud to have gained a strong partner, someone who would never leave the one who helped her pay off her debt and gave her weapons. He was sure that he had given her a job in a good company with the best boss she could ever have. Sometime later, Shuji and his partner began their journey. He had officially hired Maine as his personal guard and planned to visit a nearby city. During the trip, he noticed that the road was becoming more dangerous. Maine carried many weapons on her back and belt, was ready to fight. She was happy to be well armed. They also had extra swords in the carriage just in case the others broke. Some of the swords were ones Maud had remade and some were made using Shuji's special skill. Maine held her sword and said she was ready for any enemies. The road seemed unsafe, probably because of bandits, but Shuji hoped they wouldn't run into anyone. Then huge monsters suddenly came out of the forest, shaking the ground as they moved. The sight of them made both Shuji freeze in fear. It was the first time Shuji had seen monsters, and he realized that this world had more dangers than he expected. Maine told him that these were forest bears. They rarely left the woods, but when they did, they were wild and hard to stop. It looked like they had been chasing people. Shuji thought it would be hard to escape, but Maine calmed him down. As long as she had a weapon, she could fight them. That gave Shuji hope. He trusted her strength. Without hesitation, Maine jumped off the carriage and rushed toward the monsters. She moved quickly and aimed for the nearest one. As Shuji watched, she dodged the bear's attack and slipped behind it, ready to strike. At that time, Shuji looked out the small window of the carriage and saw that the girl was moving with much more confidence. She cut off one of the charging bear's limbs with ease. Shuji noticed how cleanly she struck and thought that if she had been a normal warrior, the attack would have only hurt the monster, not stopped it. Maine, with surprising strength and skill, rushed into a group of monsters. She sliced one of the bears in half, then lunged towards several others, taking them down one by one. Finally, one of her mithril swords broke, but she didn't stop. She quickly pulled out another sword from her belt and attacked again. Maine struck another monster without hesitation. Then she noticed even more angry beasts coming at her, drooling and ready to attack. But she didn't back down. She stayed calm, jumped into action, and defeated each monster with strong, clean strikes. Such small girl defeated a lot of monsters thrice her size with ease. She was shining on her own stage. Shuji saw that she had changed completely. Before, she used to hold back because she was afraid of breaking her weapon. That fear made her unsure in battle. But now, because of Shuji and his skill, she didn't have to worry about that anymore. She gave it her all, smiling with joy. The monsters cried out under her attacks. Shuji thought that normally it would take a cannon to stop those creatures. But Maine brought them down with just her sword. In that moment, he understood why the king and his men wanted a hero who could fight. Maine could have been a great help in war, but the people of this kingdom didn't know how to make full use of her power. Maine finished the battle feeling proud. For the first time, she fought without fear of breaking her weapon, and that had always been her dream. After the battle was over, Maine and Shuji clapped their hands and the girl promised to protect Shoji, as her sponsor Shuji was happy for her happiness. Thus they finished off well off. And a month after Maine was recruited, the two of them stood in front of the loan shark's office planning to pay off the girl's debt. On one of the alleys of the capital, Shuji and Maine approached the office of the loan shark company Golead where Maine owed money. Before they went inside, Maine had doubts. She didn't feel everything was okay because her debt was 1,000 gold coins. Shuji understood why she was worried. 10 million yen was a huge amount, but he told her that he would pay her debt and give her freedom. Even so, Maine still felt nervous. Shuji noticed her troubled face and asked her not to worry. He suggested they go inside. Maine promised she would protect Shuji with her life if needed. Trusting her words, Shuji opened the office doors. Inside, several men glared at them. Just by their appearance, Shuji could tell they worked as debt collectors and were used to being intimidating. Right away, they started speaking in a rude and harsh way. Shuji realized he wasn't used to this kind of behavior anymore. When the collectors blew cigarette smoke at Maine and made fun of her for being in debt, she felt small and powerless. But Shuji stayed calm and comforted her. He turned to the collectors and said they were there to pay off Maine's debt. Everyone in the room was shocked. They thought Maine had become the lover of a rich man, and that this was done to insult their boss. Shuji didn't understand why the boss would be angry about a debt being paid. Then a man came out of the back room, annoyed by the noise. He was the boss of the moneylenders, dressed in fancy furs. When he saw Maine, he laughed and assumed she had finally agreed to be his servant. He claimed he would treat her well and reached out to touch her, but Shuji quickly grabbed his hand and shook it instead. The boss looked confused. Shuji expected something like that to happen and stayed strong. He acted polite and said he was Maine's employer, and since she worked with him, he would pay her debt. Golead replied that even if Shuji was a kind employer, the debt was still 1,000 gold coins. Not even nobles could pay that much. But then some of the other collectors confirmed that Shuji really intended to pay the full amount. When Golead heard this, he looked at Shuji with a confused face. As he poured a drink into his glass, he stayed quiet for a moment, clearly taking the situation seriously. Then he finally spoke. He told Shuji that Maine had a special ability, and if Shuji planned to use it, he was out of luck. According to him, her skill made her so strong that her weapons would break, making them useless. He asked if Shuji still wanted to pay off her debt. Shuji replied that he already knew about Maine's problems and that he still wanted to pay her debt completely. After he said this, the people from the moneylenders company gave them heavy stares and let out killing intent, and Shuji immediately sensed danger. Their true intentions became clear right after he said he would pay. Shuji didn't understand why Golead was so worried about being paid or why he had even lent money to Maine, knowing she couldn't repay it. Then he remembered that when they talked about her skill, it made the office boss nervous. That's when he guessed the truth. They planned to trap her with debt and force her to use her power. A servant with such strength could be useful for crimes. Shuji had expected this, and he never planned to let those people take her. Suddenly, Golead changed the debt amount to 1,500 coins, which surprised Shuji since they had just agreed on a different number. The boss claimed that his workers had made a mistake with the interest, and the other moneylenders agreed. Maine complained that the new amount was unfair, but Golead said it was because of the interest that had built up over time. He challenged them to calculate it by hand, standing confidently. This trick worked because most people in that world, except rich folks and merchant apprentices, couldn't read or do math well. That meant Maine had no way to check the numbers, which the company took advantage of. But Shuji had already expected something like this. Without hesitation, he dropped a bag with 1,500 gold coins onto the table. The lender stared in shock. Shuji calmly said there were exactly 1,500 coins and told them to count it. Golead and his men were stunned, not just by the money, but by the fact that Shuji had prepared for this trick. In fact, he had brought even more money, just in case they raised the debt again. It took a while to count, but Golead's men confirmed the amount, exactly 1,500 gold coins. After that, Shuji asked for a loan agreement since he had already paid the full amount. The contract was quickly brought out. Once Golead signed it, Shuji added his signature. With that, the deal was complete and the debt was settled. Shuji and the girl quickly left the building. As they walked out, Shuji noticed the office manager forcing a smile. After a short pause, the girl, clearly impressed, thanked Shuji, but he told her that this was just the start. Later that day, as evening came, Shuji and Maine were having dinner at his cabin. But the peace wouldn't last long. He knew real fight with the Golead was about to begin. Soon, shady figures started gathering near Shuji's cabin. Maine and Shuji's dinner was cut short by a scream. It meant people had arrived. They had been expecting the robbers, which is why they heard it clearly. Two enemies had fallen into a wolf pit that had been set up earlier. Right after that, it was time to fight back. Maine lit the wooden blocks in the fireplace. Holding one burning stick in each hand, she stepped outside, with Shuji wishing her to be careful. As she walked out calmly, one of the attackers spotted her. He had no idea what Maine planned to do. Her first move was to throw a burning stick as hard as she could at the nearest enemy, and it hit him. Even a torch became dangerous in Maine's hands because of her superhuman skill. One of the bandits shouted for the others to stay calm. He said they just needed to find Shuji to win. But Shuji passed more torches to Maine and she threw them at the enemies right away. A man with an eye patch told his group to dodge and warned them not to ignore the torches since they were dealing with someone with a skill. When another group of enemies came closer, Maine threw torches at their feet. Some of the bandits laughed, thinking her aim was off, but she was only lighting up the area to show where the enemies were. Right after, Shuji handed a container to Maine. She ran toward the enemies and with a loud shout threw its contents at them before they could react. Even after the attack, the bandits didn't know what had hit them. Shuji and Maine prepared for another round while Shuji brought another basin, ready for the next move. At that moment, the attackers tried to dodge and ran away, but it didn't help. The attack spread out and hit all of them. Then they realized they needed to hide, so they started looking around for cover. However, Shuji's house was surrounded by a hedge wall, and the trees had already been cut down to make torches. Because of this, burning sticks were thrown to light up the area, showing there was nowhere to hide. Shuji handed Maine a basket filled with small stones. These stones once covered the field and Shuji had collected them, thinking they might come in handy. He called the weapon a basket shotgun, and when Maine threw it, the attack hit the leader of the attackers. The rest didn't know what to do next, seeing how their leader got done in. Before they could run, Shuji told them to surrender. He warned them that if they tried to escape, he would attack. Realizing how serious the situation was, the bandits gave up and begged for their lives. They didn't want to die for money. Shuji then asked Maine to tie them up. She praised Shuji's plan, but he believed that fighting him with just numbers would never work. Later, the Shuji and Maine went to the office of the moneylenders who had recently caused trouble. The people inside looked tired, likely because they had been waiting all night for news. When they saw Shuji alive, they were shocked. Shuji didn't understand what they were thinking, so he asked to speak with Golead, saying he had something important to discuss. One of the staff told him to wait and went to call the boss. Meanwhile, the young man and the girl waited calmly. A little later, Golead came out of the doorway and asked what business they had. Shuji told him that bandits had broken into his house the day before. Without waiting for a reply, Shuji went straight to the main point. He said the bandits claimed they were sent to kill him on orders from Golead himself. Shuji said he ignored them and told them he had nothing to do with it. Golead claimed he was not involved in it. Shuji revealed how the attackers were now enslaved and mockingly commented that he was glad to hear Golead wasn't involved. Shuji also pointed out how Golead's earlier attempt to make Maine his slave. The moneylender, clearly annoyed, told them to leave. He said he wanted to sleep. Thinking Golead had been working late, Shuji just said staying up too much was bad for his health. Then, guessing the military police would show up soon, he suggested not sleeping at all and left with Maine. Outside, Maine stayed silent at first. Later, she got upset, not understanding why Shuji had provoked the moneylenders like that. She was still scared and felt uncomfortable being near Golead. But Shuji calmly explained that he had done it on purpose, so the attackers would act more carefully next time. Maine disagreed, thinking it would only make things worse. She believed the attackers would come back again. Shuji agreed, saying that was exactly what he wanted. He said they would only attack again once things seemed peaceful, and next time they would be better prepared. He also explained that since the company cared about its image, he had provoked them into attacking early. All they had to do now was be ready to fight back. Maine was surprised at how calm and confident Shuji was. Back on Earth, when he worked for a company, Shuji often had to deal with difficult people. Their way of thinking reminded him of these moneylenders. Later that night, the robbers came back to the house. They didn't notice that Shuji and Maine were watching them. The bandits placed a pot on the ground and used magic to create smoke. Soon the house was filled with a thick purple poisonous gas. When Shuji saw the direction of the smoke, Maine explained that it was controlled by magic. Since he had already learned about this kind of magic, Shuji wasn't surprised. Everything that happened still seemed normal for another world. Noticing the poisonous smoke, Shuji suggested using potions that could protect against paralysis, poison, and sleep. Expecting that the enemy might change their strategy, he bought many potions and used his cultivation skill to earn more money. He got a full set of potions from the royal capital's potion shop and thought about selling them later because the price was good. At that moment, the robbers started to act. They damaged the fence and created hiding spots. Shuji planned to make them fix the mess later. The bandits slowly entered the house, but no one was inside. When they went deeper into the dark area, two of them suddenly disappeared. They couldn't see what was hiding in the darkness. The whole house was actually a large trap with a deep hole. Maine was surprised that someone fell for such a simple trap. Shuji explained that the attackers were hiding and couldn't use light, so they didn't see the hole inside. The trap had been dug by Maine using her superhuman skill. One of the attackers, still unsure of what happened inside the house, called for their boss. When Golead realized the plan had been discovered, he arrived and gave the order to light up the inside. A ball of light from one of the magicians showed that there was only a giant hole in the middle of the house. Now that their plan was revealed, the second part of the fight began. After the robbers gathered near the house, they saw the trap set for them. They realized no one was inside, so they started searching the area. At that moment, Shuji relied on Maine. Since the enemy couldn't kill her, she was able to fight calmly at the front, while Shuji stayed behind. Shuji noticed a few hooded people among the attackers. He didn't know who they were, but Maine moved forward and attacked. When some of the attackers spotted her, they were shocked to see her carrying several large logs. With a loud shout, Maine threw the logs into the group of enemies. They weren't ready for it, and the logs hit many of them while also destroying the house. This was part of Shuji's plan. The house could be rebuilt, and it was already old. He had created the logs using his cultivation skill to use as ammunitions, and some of them had been used as torches. After that, Maine, still holding a couple of logs, went after the rest of the enemies. She jumped into the group of fleeing robbers, spinning quickly and knocking down everyone she hit. Shuji was impressed by Maine's skills, especially when she hit a mage and sent him flying while leaving the light-based magic behind. The robbers then tried to surround her. Since they couldn't hurt her, they aimed to grab the logs and block her movements. They saw one of the logs she was holding was about to break, and when it finally snapped, they rushed in to attack. But they had forgotten that Shuji was currently Maine's sponsor. He had given her mithril swords from his armory. With those weapons, Maine easily pushed back the enemies. The robbers quickly ran away even though their leader Golead tried to stop them. The head of the moneylenders was not pleased. Only 2 fighters had faced such a large group, so he stepped onto the battlefield himself. Realizing that his followers were useless, Golead ripped the robe off the mysterious robed person and ordered him to join the fight. Shuji and his partner stared in shock at the large man now fully dressed in armor. Maine was especially surprised, since Golead had just said that she wasn't the only one with a special skill. Confirming what Shuji and the girl were thinking, Golead explained that this armored man, unlike Maine, couldn't pay off his debt and was now a servant of the moneylender. Golead ordered the armored man to capture Maine. A powerful attack came at Maine, but she managed to dodge it. She then told Shuji to back away. Shuji noticed that Maine had slowed down. She was hesitating, knowing the enemy was just an innocent slave forced to fight. Shuji guessed that Maine could probably cut through normal armor, but when she struck, her attack failed. At the moment of impact, a glow surrounded the armored man's body, completely destroying Maine's weapon in one hit. As the fight continued, Golead explained that his servant had a powerful defense skill. Even someone like Maine would struggle against it. This skill didn't just protect the body, it made the armor stronger too. Golead then threatened to force a contract on Maine once she was caught, and use it to make her kill Shuji. But Maine believed that even if a contract was forced, it couldn't be used to make someone kill. While Shuji thought this over, Golead revealed that their group had a special mage who could create irregular contracts. That explained everything. Shuji had already suspected something like this, but Maine was shocked. Maine became angry, saying that Golead would be punished once the truth came out. But Golead disagreed. Some nobles in the country supported him. Many people wanted secret work specializing in irregular slave trading, so places like his always had customers. And since the servants were bound by contracts, they couldn't discern what was right or wrong. This gave moneylenders full control. Shuji realized that the kingdom was deeply corrupted. This was the reason why Golead was confidently speaking out loud. Golead's next order was to make the armored man feel pain so he would finally capture Maine. As the attack continued, Shuji was shocked to see illegal magic used to cause pain and force someone to obey. Maine attacked the enemy again, but her weapon broke. She tried to get a spare sword from Shuji, but other servants blocked her path. She couldn't fight back, and the only thing she had left was a scabbard. Then Maine looked back at Shuji and made a quick decision that surprised him. Just then, Golead gave another order to attack. Even though Maine had no weapon, a wild-eyed knight charged at her. Ignoring Shuji's concern, she grabbed the scabbard and used it to trick the enemy. The knight fell for it, and Maine struck with the scabbard. The blow passed through the armor, hitting from the belt up to the chest. At that moment, Akina noticed something important. All of Maine's earlier attacks had been aimed at the same spot. Because of that, the enemy's defense skill had reached its limit, leaving only normal armor. Maine couldn't stand seeing the knight suffer while still obeying orders. But since he was planning to attack Shuji, she decided to stop him. She used all her strength and launched a final set of attacks. Maine won the fight, and after landing on the ground said she would be Shuji's guard. Shuji was glad. Seeing this, one of the bandits ran away, even though the boss had told him to attack the unarmed heroes. When Maine faced Golead again, he ordered his slaves to cover for him and ran from the battlefield, shouting threats. They failed to capture Golead, and Maine felt disappointed. But Shuji didn't mind. He believed Golead was already finished. Even though their office was protected by nobles, Shuji can still do something about it. 2 days later in the evening, constables arrived at the moneylender's office to investigate suspicions of illegal trading. They only found the servants there. Golead had already escaped. Afterward, the soldiers checked the magic contracts used on the servants. They discovered that illegal magic had been hidden within them. Because of this, Golead was placed on the wanted list for illegal slave trading and hiding contract magic. His property would be divided once he was caught, and society would finally feel some relief. Maine was surprised that she and Shuji had managed to bring down Golead, even though he hadn't been captured yet. She didn't understand how they could succeed against someone protected by nobles. Shuji explained that not all nobles supported the moneylender. Some were even willing to help by giving useful information. He made it simple for Maine to understand. Golead was backed by nobles who bought servants illegally, and this kind of trading could create serious problems for the country. However, the nobles were split into different groups that competed with each other, so they were often in conflict. Shuji sent a letter to the nobles who didn't support Golead. He included proof of the illegal contract. He had asked members of the Adventurers Guild, especially the quiet ones, to gather information on which nobles were helping Golead. Since outsiders couldn't meet with nobles without an introduction, and since Akina didn't want to get involved, Shuji found another way. He gave money to the guards of the noble's mansion and asked them to deliver the documents. Because of the power struggles between noble factions, many were glad to start an investigation against Golead. While Maine was impressed by Shuji's knowledge and skills, he simply remembered how his old job on Earth had also involved dealing with rival groups. Now, only Golead was left, but there was no need to worry. His former allies were now forced to hunt him down to protect themselves. Shuji, having done his part, encouraged his partner to keep going and move on to a new city. Meanwhile, the former moneylender Golead was running out of breath as he rushed through the city's alleys, wondering how things had turned out this way. Even his own men had abandoned him. He blamed everything on Shuji. If it weren't for him, Maine would have been his, and he had planned to use her to make money. Golead had even tried to stop Maine from paying her debt, but one day Shuji showed up, paid the entire amount, fought off 2 attacks, and later sent guards to Golead's office. Luckily, Golead escaped using a secret passage in his room. As he remembered all of this, he swore he would get revenge. He wanted to kill Shuji and force Maine to serve him. But first, he needed to escape the country. To do that, he needed a horse, and he was already thinking about stealing one. His thoughts were suddenly cut off when his body flipped forward and he hit the ground. Lying there, he realized he couldn't move or speak. Then a stranger walked up to him. The person said Golead's movements were sealed and that there was an order to kill him right away, without any questions or pain. Even though Golead tried to beg for his life, he couldn't even open his mouth. In the end, his life was taken without a single word. While Shuji was cleaning up the remains of a destroyed house on his land, Maine came over and told him that they had visitors. At first, Shuji didn't recognize who they were, but then he realized they were Golead's former slaves. They said they were grateful to him and wanted to thank him properly. They bowed low to the ground and thanked him for saving them. One of them explained that because of Shuji, they were freed from slavery, and their debts had been erased. Shuji realized that the group attacking the nobles backing up Golead saw the slaves as victims, and had set them free instead without sending them back to the market. Even though things had been hard, the freed people were truly thankful. They didn't forget Shuji's help and felt they owed him a lot. Shuji asked if they had steady jobs afterward. Many sighed. Some could go back to their villages or find work with family, but not all of them had that option. Some were sold by their families and some had their villages destroyed. The rest seemed unsure and sad. Shuji realized another problem had appeared after their freedom. That said, he was not responsible for them, and he only attacked Golead to gain Maine since she was profitable. He shouldn't shoulder someone else's burden. A moment later, Maine pulled Shuji aside and asked him to help these people. He understood what she felt, but he couldn't afford to support so many people even if he tried to raise money. Maine then suggested hiring them to work at Shuji's future shop. She said that he might own a shop or run trade caravans one day. Shuji thought about it seriously. If he wanted to grow as a merchant, he would need people to manage the selling of goods. After hearing Maine's reasoning, Shuji realized that he hadn't been thinking like a leader. His years of working in an office had shaped the way he thought, and with that mindset, he couldn't keep chasing his dream. As Shuji thought about this, he noticed that the people around him were looking at him, waiting for an answer. Their eyes were filled with hope. Nervous from being the center of attention, he turned to face them and made an offer. He would give them jobs at his store. Shuji didn't care that they had once been servants. Respecting their wishes, Shuji agreed to count on them. After they accepted, they asked him to take care of them as their master. Shuji had now become a large merchant who employed over a dozen people. In this world, someone like that was called a master. The new workers were so happy that they promised to follow him for the rest of their lives. This surprised Shuji, and from then on, he had to keep it in mind whenever he hired someone. The next day, Shuji went to the capital and visited the workshop district. There he stopped by a blacksmith shop. When they met, the dwarf blacksmith told him that someone was targeting him. Shuji and his partner looked at the dwarf in shock after hearing the bad news. Another problem had come their way. At the forge on Workshop Street, Shuji learned he was being targeted because of his connection to gold and the Ganiller. Some people wanted to get rid of him, and even visited the gnome to gather any information they could. Akina arrived planning to fix her weapon and hire some of the former servants. But when she heard what was happening, she stayed to listen. After Golead was caught, the nobles who had been buying illegal servants were exposed. This caused a shift in power among them. Shuji guessed that some nobles had lost a lot and sent assassins after him, but he had no plans to die. The blacksmith told him to run away quickly. After saying goodbye, Akina and her partner left. Maine then asked for forgiveness, feeling guilty about everything. Still, Shuji calmly talked to her about it. She was glad he could be open with her. Shuji suggested they leave the country sooner and start their own business. But Maine wasn't sure what to do about the new workers they had hired. Escaping with a dozen people would be hard, and Shuji didn't know if he could find work for all of them in another country. Not wanting to take unnecessary risks, he decided to stick to their original plan. Later at the Merchant Guild, the former slaves arrived in a group to sign papers. Shuji and Maine, wearing disguises, quietly watched. The new employees were being trained to work as store clerks, learning basic trading skills. Each person was given a role that matched their strengths. In the future, these workers would manage a local shop selling goods made by Shuji and grown overseas. Finally, Maine and Akina found time to talk about where to escape. For now, they blended in as regular townspeople. After saying goodbye to the staff, they left the room. Maine guessed that the border had already been alerted about their possible escape using communication magic. This surprised Shuji. He had underestimated how advanced this world was. He realized they had no choice but to leave the country. But escaping wasn't easy. Maine explained that magic users at the border could track anyone trying to cross without going through an official checkpoint. However, tracking magic didn't cover the entire border, only flatlands and areas with shelters. Dangerous places weren't watched closely. Still, Maine said it would be nearly impossible to send goods through those unsafe areas. Akina sighed. Escaping the country and arranging product shipments at the same time seemed impossible. Feeling stuck, Shuji thought about starting over, but he didn't want to abandon the people he had already hired. After thinking it over, Maine suggested they head to the Forest of Dark Destruction. Shuji learned that the forest was very dangerous and full of monsters, but it didn't have any tracking magic. The forest was surrounded by different countries, but no one cut it down because doing so could create paths that might lead to invasion. The forest also gave off strange waves that weakened magic users. It was so big that its length matched the size of an entire country. Even though it was dangerous, Maine still recommended it. She believed they could get through it because she trusted her own skills now. Though it was all thanks to Shuji providing her the weapons. Shuji agreed with her and didn't think she was showing off. In fact, he believed that her confidence was one of her strengths. Shuji thought that if they could make it through the forest, it would be easier to get supplies and pick which country to escape to. After understanding the situation, Shuji told Maine they needed to plan an escape. But before that, they had to figure out how to get through the forest and what supplies they would need. He wondered what essentials should they prepare first. Maine only thought of the most important thing. Later, Shuji and Maine went to the royal capital's potion shop. Shuji noticed that Maine acted more dependable when she had a goal in mind. As he entered the shop, he realized it was different from the one where he used to buy potions, and he felt curious about what he would find. While looking at the shelves and the people shopping, Shuji saw a woman picking up a potion. She looked calm and graceful. Maine noticed Shuji staring and reminded him how to tell potions apart by their color. Blue would heal wounds, green would cure poison, and yellow could remove paralysis. The quality of a potion could also be seen through its clarity. Cheaper potions had some dirt or particles in them, while better ones were clear. But good potions were expensive, which was normal for items that get used up. Maine offered to pick some good but affordable potions herself. Shuji interrupted her and suggested they buy a high-quality potion instead. He didn't wait to hear the rest of the conversation. He just looked at the potion's clearness and assumed that since they were heading into a dangerous forest, they should bring the best supplies. The next moment, Shuji walked up to the seller and asked to buy 10 pieces of each of the best potions. Everyone around him was surprised. Buying so many high-level potions at once usually meant the person was rich, even though Shuji didn't look wealthy at all. Some people thought Shuji was a slave of a nobleman running errands and kept watching him. Shuji realized that his actions were like those of a rich businessman on Earth who bought everything in a store. Then he looked at the woman he had seen earlier. She looked surprised too, then smiled at him. Shuji didn't know why, but something about that moment gave him a strange feeling, especially with Maine looking unhappy nearby. Just then the sellers called out to him. They had finished preparing the potions. While checking them, Shuji noticed a strange-looking potion and asked what it was. The shopkeeper explained that it was a monster-repelling potion. If someone sprinkled it on a cart, the smell would keep monsters away. Even better, the effect would last for a whole week without any monster attacks. Shuji thought it was very useful. The woman from earlier reacted, but Maine said she had never heard of a potion like that before. The seller quickly said a traveling mage had sold it to them and that the store had tested it. Each potion cost 10 gold coins, enough to hire several adventurers for a week. While others talked about how expensive it was, Shuji decided to buy some anyway because he liked the idea. Shuji asked how effective the potion was. The seller said the mage claimed it could keep away monsters up to B rank. Maine explained that monsters at that level usually needed a team of skilled adventurers to fight them. So Shuji thought that if this potion could help, it might make things easier for Maine in the forest. He wanted to find out the real market price. After that, he started bidding, saying he wanted to buy all the potions in stock if they would sell them to him for 6 gold coins each. Even though buying everything was surprising, 6 gold was too low. Maine asked Shuji if he was really sure about buying everything. Shuji assumed they didn't have a lot due to the price. The seller pushed once more and agreed to sell the potions for 8 gold each. Shuji then asked her if she thought the product would become popular. She admitted that she didn't think they could sell the potions later. After hearing this, the seller asked them to wait and ran into another room in a panic. A few moments later, 2 people came back quickly. The store manager then told Shuji that if he bought all the potions, they could lower the price to 7 gold coins each. However, the total cost was 200 gold, including the other potions he bought. When converted to Earth money, it was several million yen, but Shuji thought the monster avoidance potion now had become cheaper. Everyone in the store went silent as they held their breath. Akina agreed to buy everything. The sellers were happy to get rid of the old stock and get their money back. Akina left 40 gold coins as a down payment and planned to pay the rest after the potions were delivered. When Akina went outside and started planning to grow the potions, he ran into the same woman again. This made Shuji wonder if she was following him, but she didn't look like one of their pursuers. However, Shuji noticed Maine looking down. Maine seemed upset, thinking Shuji had been staring at the other girl with long black hair and big breasts. To calm her down, Akina told her to go home and check some things together. This helped improve her mood. As he thought about the dangerous dark forest of destruction, he got an idea thanks to the monster protection potion. Sometime later, he stood near the body of a huge snake. Maine stood on top of it and asked if he was serious about living in such a dangerous place. Shuji believed that if they used the potion alongside Maine's power, they wouldn't have to run away. He then decided that the dark forest would become their new main base. Thinking back to how it all happened, Shuji remembered the girl's question about living there. A few days earlier, on the second day in the dark forest, Shuji got tired and sat down on the roots of a big tree. Seeing how tired he was, his partner suggested they start training. She didn't consider that she had superhuman strength. The girl also noticed how quiet the forest was, which was strange since monsters usually attacked right away. That silence proved that the monster protection potion was working. The purchase had been worth it. The monsters ran away as soon as they saw the potion start to evaporate. Shuji began to believe the stories he had heard about the potion that protected people from monsters. That was why, before they entered the forest, the man had said they could escape their enemies by going through the dark forest of destruction. After buying the potion, Shuji quickly decided to build a base inside the forest. This made Maine ask why he had chosen such a dangerous place. Shuji explained that even if they ran to another country, they might not be safe there either. Also, no one had followed them into the forest. At that time, Maine was busy with a task. She was attaching something to the trunk of a tree. She set up a weapon because even with the potion, they still faced danger. She asked what Shuji was even making her do. Shuji mentioned how they still had problems despite having the monster avoidance potion. Suddenly, loud noises got nearer. Maine then realized he was talking about the monster that was quickly approaching them. It was a high-rank monster, known as the King of the Forest of Destruction, a huge snake carrying the bodies of forest bears in its mouth. The bear-like monster had only been prey for the giant snake. Before entering the forest, Shuji had studied information about the forest. He had also checked their gear. He made Maine carry a mithril sword made by the dwarf, and Shuji also wore light armor that protected his weak spots. Maine had just finished her preparations. Since staying safe in the forest was their top priority, Shuji believed that defeating the Forest King would be a big step forward for them. But Maine didn't understand why he thought beating the snake would make the forest safe, especially when they hadn't even chosen a proper base yet. Shuji had only said that the monster had to be defeated first. While they were talking, the snake appeared behind them, ready to strike. Shuji had expected it to show up, just not this soon. In the next moment, the snake attacked the two. Maine defended herself, but her sword broke during the clash. She quickly switched to a stronger weapon. Taking a fighting stance, she pointed her blade at the monster. Leaves fell around them as Maine and the snake stared each other down. Then both of them started moving, crashing through trees as they chased each other. Maine landed a hit on the snake and followed with another attack, but this only made the creature angrier. It lunged at her, but she dodged just in time, though Shuji was clearly worried. The monster's next attack was a fog of poison, something Shuji had already known the snake could do. At that moment, Maine couldn't get close enough to attack. Seeing how hopeless the situation was, Shuji pulled the cord, believing the snake's position and speed were just right. At the same time, the girl looked back and finally understood what they had been setting up all this time. The cord dragged a large number of potion boxes, each one spilling its contents onto the snake. Not long ago, Shuji and Maine had set up this trap using potions that protected against monsters. The girl had been surprised by how many potions there were, but Shuji told her he had bought more. According to the potion's ingredients, monsters feared poison. Even a strong monster ranked A would stop moving if covered in poison. Once it couldn't move, it became easy to attack. When Akina gave the signal, Maine pulled trees from the ground. Holding one in each hand, she ran toward the monster, shaking with fear. Maine had trapped the snake behind trees, preventing it to move. She saw a chance and charged. But in the next second, the snake broke free from the trap and struck at Maine. It wrapped its tail around her while Shuji watched, worried for his partner. The monster's skin released slime, and small snakes crawled out of its tail, slipping under the girl's clothes. Maine didn't let herself get bitten. She broke free from the snake's grip, surprising even Shuji. She said she was a guard for the rich merchant Shuji, and this was just the beginning of their journey. Their new business and adventure were just starting, and the snake was their first stepping stone. Jumping back into the fight, Maine promised to turn the monster into rust. She cut it into pieces, giving it no chance to survive. Standing over the defeated monster, Shuji saw her true strength and finally understood why Golead wanted her. He decided to give her a bonus, and she was happy about it. That was exactly what happened. When asked about living in that place, Shuji explained that he had been quietly checking how strong his partner was and how well the potions worked. He did this in secret so the girl wouldn't get nervous, and he left out the part about the trap. In the end, Maine was able to fight off the monster. The snake's lair was a large area, and because of the monster's power and smell, other creatures stayed away. That's why, after winning the battle, they decided to turn the place into their new base. All they needed to do was bring a carriage and set up an office. The next thing that Shuji and Maine had to do in the Forest of Dark Destruction was to build an office. Maine did most of the work, but Shuji helped by hammering nails and fitting pieces of wood together. They started by leveling the ground. Maine prepared the land carefully using a single log to flatten the space. After that, they worked on the foundation. Maine threw the support beams into place with ease, and Shuji attached the logs one by one. Maine finished putting up the main structure quickly, and after a while, Shuji added the final touches. Shuji and Maine stood back and looked at the house from a distance. The office was finished. It looked great, especially for their first try. Shuji's interest in log houses, which he still remembered from earlier days, helped a lot. Even though a few small areas still needed work, Shuji wasn't too worried. He hadn't heard about any earthquakes in the area, so he believed the house would be safe. Behind one of the doors was the most important part of the site, the growing field. A fence was built around it so Shuji could work there in peace. Not even Maine was allowed to disturb him. He planned to make more monster avoidance potions and especially mithril swords, as their supply had run out. When Maine entered the house, she was happy to finally have her own room. Only wealthy merchants or nobles usually had that kind of space. Shuji said they could buy decorations for their rooms on their next trip to the city. Maine liked the idea. Shuji also noticed the house was decorated with bones from a large snake. Maine said she had done it on purpose, to scare away monsters. Shuji realized that the bones were a way to show that the land had an owner. Then Maine asked Shuji a question that surprised him. She brought up the way he spoke. He didn't understand the issue at first, but she explained that, as his teammate, she wanted him to talk more casual, like he did with the blacksmith. She also said she would feel more comfortable if they spoke more casually with each other. She quickly apologized, saying it wasn't her place to ask for such a thing as just a guard. But Shuji took it seriously. He thought she was right. His polite way of speaking might have created distance between them. After thinking it over, he agreed and changed how he spoke. This made Maine feel a bit shy. As they restarted their partnership in a more friendly way, Shuji realized their relationship had entered a new stage. But then he began to shake. Maine was crushing his hands. She quickly let go and apologized. Shuji was glad that he just bought high-quality potions. A month later, Shuji and Maine were getting ready to return to the store, which they had left in the care of their new workers who stayed in the city. But Maine didn't want to leave the peaceful time they had spent alone. Still, Shuji explained that one of the workers, Oguma, had already gone to the forest and reported that there were no signs of anyone following them. So, Shuji believed that their pursuers had finally given up. Over the past month, he had used his cultivation skill to grow and produce many goods, increasing their supplies. They also had to return to the city because they were running out of money to pay their workers. The forest had only been a temporary base, so it was time to go back and continue their business. Later, they met Oguma and the other staff, who led them to the store building. The outside of their new store looked clean and well-made. Shuji said the building looked neat and he was invited to look inside as well. When he stepped inside, he discovered a tidy room with neatly dressed workers. He and Maine were impressed by what they saw. The workers welcomed Shuji as their master, which made him feel a bit awkward. He thanked them for their work and told them to continue working, since everyone seemed nervous about the surprise visit. He also said the store looked great, and both he and Maine truly liked it. However, Shuji became curious about the cost of the store. Since it was on a busy main street in a good location and looked new, he thought it might have been very expensive. Oguma then gave them a quick tour and explained that even though the outside looked nice, many parts inside were still old and worn down. The outside was just covered with thin boards to make it look better for customers. Oguma added that for a regular person to own a large fancy building, they would need a special permit. Shuji didn't know much at first. To get the store, they needed a valid reason, a large amount of money, and trust, things that were hard to earn in the city. Doing business in the city market required long-term support from powerful people. That's why they were only able to buy a small, rundown shop. Since the building was very old, the first thing the workers did was clean it up and make it look better. This way, they could tell the authorities that they hadn't rebuilt it, only fixed it up. Oguma and the others did a great job, and Shuji noticed their effort. He felt that hiring them, as Maine suggested, was the right choice. The workers also rented a small house nearby, just as Shuji had asked. In the past, servants never expected to live in proper housing, so this was a nice change for them. Oguma had some concerns. He wasn't sure if it was okay for them to take 2 days off each week, but Shuji encouraged it, wanting them to rest and have free time. Even though Oguma wasn't used to such conditions, Shuji explained that they would also be paid for working extra hours. Shuji made this choice because on regular land, unpaid work and long hours were normal. But he wanted their store to be a better place to work. The employees were truly thankful. Shuji then asked when the store would open. The sellers had finished their training, and once the goods arrived, they could start. One worker said she had been a general manager before, so Shuji trusted her and let her take charge. He and his partner were happy with how things were going. After that, Akina gave the order to unload the goods and choose the first ones to sell. Joji asked about the price list he had requested from the royal capital. The workers explained they could only gather prices from stores they were allowed to enter. Some stores sold only to nobles or specialized buyers like carpenters. Shuji told them to keep tracking price changes in the same way. He started thinking about what their first product should be. He also asked them to prepare several carriages to move goods closer to the dark forest of destruction. With a deep breath, Shuji felt pleased that everything was going well with the start of his newly opened business. A week later, one of Shuji's employees came to him looking excited. The store was almost ready to open, but something unusual had happened. Someone had come to see Shuji. Akina didn't know who it was. Even though he was still hiding, he thought it might be someone chasing him. He believed they had already lost his trail, but he couldn't be sure. Oguma then explained that the visitor was a woman who said she wouldn't leave until she met the store owner. This meant she likely knew how the boy felt about the store. Oguma also said the woman called herself Sasha, a name that sounded familiar to Maine. She was known as an adventurer and a researcher of magical items. Still, Shuji didn't understand why someone so well known would come looking for him, so he quickly went to meet her. When Akina walked into the store and saw the tall woman, he recognized her right away. She was the same person they had met before at the potion shop. Now she was there to thank them for the tea. 2 weeks ago, Maine and Shuji sat inside a hut. Maine was lighting a magic lamp and showed it to the man. The lamp gave off light without using oil. Akina was surprised. He thought that maybe Ogum had brought this strange item along with the report he delivered. It was the first time Akina had seen anything like it. As he remembered, similar magical items had appeared during Golead's attack and the summoning. Maine broke his thoughts by explaining that in the royal capital, shops were now selling these lamps and they had become very popular. She also said that magical items were usually expensive and hard to make. Shuji held up the lamp and thought it would be great if their store had someone who could make things like this. Still, he knew that finding the right person wouldn't be easy. He fixed his collar and kept that thought in mind. Soon, he entered Akina's room, greeted him, and apologized for being late, saying he had just changed clothes. Akina and Maine sat across from the woman they had met earlier at the potion shop. After that, Oguma left the room. The woman was named Sasha, a known researcher of magical items. She noticed that her name was becoming more recognized. Shuji introduced himself as Akina Shoji, the store owner. This surprised Sasha. She hadn't expected him to be the shop owner after seeing him in the potion shop she visited before. Still, she thought it was a lucky coincidence. She repeated her name and explained that she was a mage who studied magical items. From her appearance alone, Akina had already guessed she was involved in that kind of work. He thought she looked a bit suspicious, and depending on what happened, Maine might step in. Shuji asked why she wanted to meet. Sasha said she wanted to show them something. Then she lifted her skirt slightly and stretched out her leg. From under it, she took out a bundle. He noticed how she got some nice legs, but Shuji kept his eyes closed, trying to stay calm. He wondered why she hid it there in the first place, while Maine coughed in annoyance. Sasha opened the bundle. Inside were several objects. Shuji and Maine looked at them with interest. Sasha picked up a jug, pointed the open end at them, and pressed a button. A glowing magic circle formed around it, and water poured out. Shuji and Maine jumped up from their seats in surprise. Shuji started to panic since the floor was getting flooded, and Maine asked if the item was magical. Sasha stayed calm and confirmed that it was a magic item. She explained that pressing the switch allowed even non-magic users to use the device. She exclaimed these were something she got after excavating some ancient ruins and were lost magia's magic items. A second magic circle appeared, and this time, flame came out. Shuji was amazed but was more worried about the floor burning. Sasha held her staff above her head and explained that lost magic was different from modern magic. She said that long ago there was a highly advanced magical civilization unlike today. Back then, many things were done with the help of magic items, which made their lives easier and more developed. Sasha touched another item and said that ancient magic tools had parts that couldn't be made today. People today couldn't recreate the same items. She picked it up and said that this one could make a small amount of wind magic, even though it was weaker. Then she pressed the button again. As soon as she did, Shuji and Maine were thrown back and hit the wall. They lay on the floor amazed as the water started to dry up. They stood up again, and Maine said that with power like that, it would be easy to defeat bandits, but such item could be worth several hundreds of gold coins. Shuji asked if Sasha planned to sell it to him. She shook her head and said that the built-in magic stones were already used up, so the item couldn't work anymore. She showed this by pressing the button again. Nothing happened. Her analysis was done, so the items were now useless. Maine had a hard time believing it, especially since the items seemed so valuable. Shuji stood silently. He thought Sasha had just made a bold product presentation. He put his hand on his chin and began to think. Sasha had brought some disposable magic items with her because she wanted to do some business talks. Sasha said she had already studied the magic items. She explained that she could fix them and make them work again. The others asked what she meant. Sasha showed a magic staff and explained that these items came from lost magia, which was considered the highest form of magical technology. Even now, many researchers still couldn't fully understand or repair them. Sasha said she planned to study all the lost magic and create something even better. Her real reason for coming was to ask Shuji to support her research financially. Shuji asked why she didn't just sell her research to the country. Sasha said that public institutions were already controlled by magicians of the country. Shuji then asked why she didn't sell her work to a private noble instead. Sasha explained that most nobles were only interested in things other than research. Shuji couldn't help but agree. He thought Sasha was very beautiful and attractive. Compared to Maine, she was much more developed. Just thinking about that made him feel Maine's murderous aura behind him. Shuji then asked why she picked him. There were many other big shop owners, yet she chose him, even though his business hadn't officially started yet. Sasha reached into her chest area and pulled something out between her cleavage. Shuji wondered why she kept something there. The group was shocked to see a monster avoidance potion. Sasha held it and explained that she made it using an old recipe she found while exploring the Legia ruins. Shuji finally realized what the potion was. Maine turned to Shuji and said that the Legia ruins were very dangerous, even for skilled adventurers. Sasha added that exploring ruins cost a lot of money, and the potion ingredients were rare and expensive. Akina also mentioned that potion sales had been low. Because of the high costs and low sales, Sasha had almost given up. But when someone bought the potion, she felt hopeful. Maybe that person would understand and support her research. Shuji sat in deep thought. He realized that Sasha had sold the monster avoidance potion in that store to find a sponsor, and he seemed to fit what she was looking for. He seriously thought about the funding her research. Maine and Shuji sat quietly. Right now, Shuji's main goal was to become a free trader in this world. So far, he got his cultivation skill, a store, and a guard, which helped him expand his business. He also recalled his cultivation skill's only weakness was it can only increase items that were completed. In other words, he currently had a factory but no research and development division. As for escorting, only Maine can protect him. Shuji looked at Sasha. She was a magic item researcher and a mage who could explore dangerous ruins. Even though she acted a little strange, she seemed like a rare and well-suited person for the job. His eyes brightened. He realized this wasn't just a talk about money, it was about finding the right person to work with. Still, he wasn't sure if Sasha was really skilled or just pretending. He decided to stay cautious and take the talk seriously from now on. Shuji then asked what their advantage was in funding her research. Maine looked surprised. Shuji believed that showing their strength would help convince Sasha to join his store. Sasha listed their advantages. First, she could make magic items. She could also restore them. The cost of tools, materials, and upgrades added up to 2,000 gold coins. That was equal to about 20 million yen in Japanese money. Shuji thought about it for a moment, then called Oguma. Oguma came in, handed him a bag, and Shuji took out 1,000 gold coins. He said he was ready to give this amount now as research funding. When the finished items were ready, he would pay the remaining 1,000 gold coins. Sasha looked shocked and asked if he was really okay with giving that much money. Shuji answered that it wasn't a problem. With his cultivation skill, he could just grow the restored items. Sasha said it was bold to pay so much right away. Shuji then asked if she could accept more funding if he became her sponsor. But he had one condition. He said he wanted her to work at his store. Her job would include making magic items to sell and guarding him as the owner. She could also use her time for research. First, though, she would need to take a test to see how well she could guard the store over several days. Sasha thought about it and agreed. She said working at Shuji's store would let her focus on her research instead of risking her life in ruins just to earn money. She shook Shuji's hand and accepted the condition. She asked if she had to pass the security test first. Shuji smiled and said he looked forward to it. A few days later, near the edge of the dark forest of destruction, Shuji, Maine, and Sasha stood on the road with their carriage behind them. Shuji remembered that other workers had asked him to check out a nearby village to see if it was good for business. They also wanted to test if Sasha could handle a fight as a guard. Suddenly, they heard strange noises coming closer. Shuji guessed what it was. He had recently heard that monsters had attacked the village. Moments later, he saw what was making the noise. It was a pack of wild horses running toward them, crying out loudly. Shuji reached out to Sasha, saying he would rely on sensei. Sasha agreed and asked if he meant her when he said sensei. Shuji thought to himself that it was just a common way of speaking. He also remembered that Sasha was more of a researcher. As a magician, she was somewhat strong, which was good enough for now. Shuji quietly asked her how strong the wild horses were. Maine looked nervous. She explained that the horses were vicious monsters that used their large hooves to crush their prey. On their own, they were rated as C-ranked monsters. But because they were fast and hard to escape from or catch, they were more dangerous in open spaces like this one. That made them more like B-ranked monsters. Shuji realized these horses were about as strong as the forest bears Maine had defeated before. Sasha stepped forward without fear. This was the first time Shuji would see a mage fight, and it seemed like it would be something special. She formed a magic circle with a star in the center. She said it was time to show her research. Then, many more magic circles appeared around her, each with different shapes inside. Maine moved behind Shuji, and they both noticed that the air had suddenly turned cold. Sasha crossed her arms and told them the horses would become frozen. She waved her hands toward the animals and summoned a fountain of ice, gathering all the magic circles into one large one. The others watched with amazement. The ice spread across the ground and stopped the horses in their tracks, but the animals, showing unexpected intelligence, tried to jump over the frozen surface at high speed. Sasha explained that with Shuji's funding, she had quickly fixed an old magical item that had been broken during an excavation. She lifted her dress, and a pole-shaped magical object dropped out. When she picked it up, it caught fire. She began to spin the pole. After saying a phrase, "Remagic item Ice Hell Princess," the ground started freezing even faster. The horses froze in place, unable to move. Shuji noticed how much quicker the ice spread and was surprised. The monsters slipped and crashed to the ground. They couldn't stand back up and made loud noises as they fell. Sasha looked proud and asked the others what they thought of her restored magic item. Shuji was surprised she could already repair such things, while Maine spoke with admiration about how well she combined magic with a tool. However, she hadn't finished yet. When she saw the wanderer horses running away, she made another magic circle. She said it was useless for them to escape and called them ponies. Then she opened her arms and said it was time to end the show. The others shouted that the air had turned really cold. Sasha lowered her hands, then quickly raised them again. A bunch of magic circles appeared around her. The boys stared at them with wide eyes and open mouths. Sasha used a spell that created homing ice arrows. Sharp ice arrows appeared in the center of each magic circle. Maine and Shuji watched closely, curious about what would happen next. The horses started to panic. Sasha raised her hands again and pointed toward the horses. She gave the command and all the arrows flew straight at the animals. The horses ran fast and Shuji thought they would escape, but Maine told him to look ahead. Suddenly, ice formed on the ground in front of the horses. They slipped and fell. The boys felt nervous and the horses were clearly terrified. The ice arrows hit the animals one after another. The horses cried out in pain but were quickly defeated. Sasha stood tall, proud of what she had done. Shuji remembered that Maine had once said fighting in open spaces was difficult. Sasha quietly mentioned that these monsters were acting strange and their numbers were unusual. Shuji realized she had shifted into researcher mode. He had heard stories about Sasha, the magical item researcher. She turned to Shuji and asked if she had passed the job test. He said of course she had. Then she smiled and said it was nice to finally meet her future boss's son. She stood on top of the hill as the sun shone on her. Shuji looked at her and thought she might be another great worker for the Akina store. Meanwhile, Maine started to panic. She now had a rival. A week had passed since Sasha started working at Akina's shop in the royal capital. One day, Shuji and Maine watched as she showed them a new spell. She held a staff with a ball on the end and cast the spell. A magic circle appeared above the staff and it spewed out flames. Sasha looked pleased. The others watched closely. Sasha giggled and said she had only been able to study this staff because of the money Shuji gave her. She mentioned needing more funds and Shuji agreed, saying he didn't expect her to fix something with lost magic right away. Sasha explained that she had bought a stone to restore the pattern on the staff, but its maximum usage still hadn't improved beyond 6 times. She said she wanted to create something better than any lost magic item. Maine told her that what she had done was already impressive. Then Sasha stretched out her leg and said she wanted to add a new product to the shop. She showed them a lantern. Maine asked if it was another magical item. Sasha said yes and explained that she used old magic technology to make it even better than normal lanterns. Shuji was surprised. Maine pointed out that in just 1 week, Sasha had repaired the fire staff and also made a brand new item. Sasha pressed a button on the magic lantern and it lit up. The others were amazed. Sasha wanted to compare it to the ones sold in the city, so she returned the earlier version to their store in the capital. When Shuji asked how many she had, Sasha opened a cloth cover showing 10 more lanterns. She said Oguma and others helped her. Sasha explained that only she could restore items with lost magic, and once she made the energy and core, the rest was easy to manufacture. Shuji was glad the development team could make these items so quickly, and realized that they can continue with their business. They decided to go to a village near the Forest of Dark Destruction to start selling right away. Shuji thought to himself that the village was far from the capital. It had no shops and only a few people. Most worked as guides. They had learned about the village's needs by asking Oguma and the others to survey it in advance. When they arrived, a man came up and introduced himself as the village chief. He thanked them for defeating the wanderer horses. Shuji already knew the village had been attacked before, but lately monsters had started showing up, even though the forest was supposed to be far enough to keep them safe. The elder said the attacks had stopped, but Shuji noticed the villagers still looked scared, especially at night when it was the darkest. He told the chief that they were from a store called Akina's store. The elder was surprised. Shuji pointed to their carriage and said they wanted to sell in their village. After the village chief spoke, he said he would try to make a deal with them. Behind him stood another man who asked if they had anything rare from the city. The man replied that they were renting a small corner. His plan was to sell useful items that people needed. In this village, they planned to sell lanterns designed by Sasha. Since the country was facing a food shortage, they decided to start with cheaper items as they usually did. They set out their goods, and soon people began to ask about the prices. Many said the items were cheaper than those sold in the capital during their travels. They sold the usual things, and before long, the man thought it was time to start selling the lanterns. But then, a few new people arrived. They were also merchants. They greeted the village and asked if they could also sell their goods. Shuji asked who they were. The two merchants smiled and each held a lantern. One said their lanterns brought light to the dark world. The other removed the cover from his lantern and added that light helped everything, even plants and trees. Both merchants then introduced themselves as part of the Grigori Magic Lantern Shop. Maine told Shuji that this shop was their rival. Shuji remembered that Maine had shown him some lantern shops from the royal capital not long ago. One of the Grigori sellers began calling out to the villagers. He said they had seen a monster on the way to the village, which surprised Maine. But Shuji knew this was a lie because they had already used Sasha's monster-repelling potion on their way there. The merchant continued talking, saying he had also been afraid. He warned the villagers that the sun was about to set and that monsters might attack in the dark. He tried to scare them, saying these monsters looked like normal people but would suddenly scream and attack. Shuji couldn't understand why the merchant was scaring people instead of just selling products where there was real demand. The merchant then held up a lantern and claimed it was the newest magic lantern from Grigori. He told the villagers they needed it to light up the area. It felt like he was forcing people to buy out of fear. Sasha calmly sipped her tea while Shuji realized they were using an unfair and forbidden method to sell their goods. Then Maine shouted that they shouldn't buy anything from that store. The merchants looked at them with confusion and walked over. They said their shop also sold magic lanterns. After seeing the lanterns, the second merchant asked about the group's strange uniform and claimed it was nothing compared to the better-looking one made by someone like him. One of the group asked if the merchants really thought they were the same. The merchant loudly introduced himself as Professor Gridge. He said he could make anything and called himself a genius who created magical tools. The other merchant joined in, saying he would sell no matter what. He introduced himself as Gorage, the manager of the store. They claimed they would make profits even at the end of the world. Shuji started to feel a bit uneasy by how persistent they were. He wondered if they had done something wrong or if they were just bothering people. The second merchant insulted their lanterns, saying they looked like they were made from horse bones and were too weak to sell. Maine didn't like how they acted. Shuji told the merchants that they wouldn't know if the lanterns would sell unless they tried. Maine then asked Sasha to get involved, but Sasha was chilling under a parasol. Maine said out loud that Sasha was really sleeping and mentioned that she did this often. Maine began to worry a bit since Sasha's job was to help create tools and protect them, yet she only seemed interested in research. Sasha stayed asleep, even letting out small snores. The merchants started to take interest in the group. They noticed how calm and confident Shuji was. They then offered a challenge to compare both lanterns and see which one people would want to buy. Maine didn't fully understand what was going on, but Shuji thought the challenge sounded fun. Sasha stayed asleep. The merchants claimed their lanterns were top-quality magical tools with very bright light. They also said they were worth the price. Shuji accepted the challenge. A crowd began to gather around them, excited to see what would happen next.